Alright guys, today I'm gonna show you how I add new features to my SaaS side project. The project I'm currently building is called Hightail Vault, and it's a community for people interested in this game called Hightail. In the forum section we can see all these threads, and when I click on one and scroll down I can also see comments. But there's one very important feature missing, and that's upvoting threads and comments. Just looking at the interface, it might look like a very simple feature to add, but what you're not seeing is all the stuff that goes in the backend. So to help me build these new features, I wanna first visualize my database. So I start off very simple with just the thread, comment and the user tables. So I need some way to connect the user to the threads and the comments. This was my first idea on how to implement this, but after learning more about SQL, this didn't turn out to be the most optimal solution. So I found this great presentation called SQL Anti-Patterns, and they go over some database design choices. And the example they show is very similar to what I'm trying to achieve. So I decided to use their design and try to implement it in my project. So after watching the presentation, I decided to create something like this. Can you see why this is so much more better? Now I only need to connect the user to as one table, the interactable one. And if I want to add any more objects than I want to vote on, I only need to connect them to the interactable table. I always start by writing an integration test, as I like to follow what is called test-driven development. This is my favorite way to add new features, as I'm pretty confident that they will work in production too. So let's go through the whole workflow. When using test-driven development, you should always start by writing a failing test. So let's go to my tests folder and integration services and thread services. This is the most simple test I currently have. What it does, it fetches a single thread from a database and checks if it has all of these values. And the feature we want to add is we want to add voting to all of the threads. So we want to add a new parameter, votes count, and let's set it to 1 for this test. So now we can run the tests, and hopefully what we see is that the test fails. Alright, the test fails, which is great. This is probably the only time when you will be happy that your tests don't work. Okay, now that our test is correct but it's failing, what we need to do is actually program the feature we want to have. For a thread, we need to add the interactable ID field, an interactable table, and a vote table. So let's start working on that. The way I handle changes in my database is by using migrations. In my project, I have this folder called migrations. So what are migrations? Migrations are these small SQL files that change the database in some way. The reason why I have so many of these files is that every time I want to set up a new database, I can just run all of them in order and they will create the required tables for me. So to create the required tables, we need to create a new migration. After it's done, I'm going to run my integration tests again to see if the migration works correctly. Okay, it works, but now we have some new errors. We can see that the null value in column interactable ID violates not null constraint. What is this error about? Let's check out how I fill the database with the test data. So in my thread service tests, we can see before running all of my tests, I'm reading some SQL files and then executing them on the database. These are called fixtures. They are small SQL files that add some test data into your database. So the first fixture I run is called clear all fixtures, and we can find it right here. What it does, it deletes all of the items from the database. Next I have fixtures like users, which adds some test users into my database. And in our terminal we can see we are getting an error, interactable ID violates not null constraint. In our thread fixtures file, we can see we are inserting some test data into these columns, but there is no interactable ID there, so we need to add one of those there. Okay, now we have a new error again. Insert or update on table thread violates foreign key constraint. So I feel like this is because we are running the threads before we run the interactables. It should be the other way around. Let's try again, once more. Oh, finally it works. And I mean, finally it fails again, but at least it doesn't give any error. Wow, that was a lot harder than I thought. So we can finally move on to the next part. And the next part is to create the vote table. This one should be a lot more easier, as we don't need any default data for it. Alright, so I added this vote table. It's pretty simple, but I'm just gonna run the test again to see if it works. Alright. There's no problems with the migrations, so we can move on to updating our query that we use to fetch threads by their ID. I think I'm gonna use pgadmin again just to play with this query to get it working correctly. Wow, so I think I got the query working. So what we can do now is take this query and replace the one we have over here. And if everything works fine, our integration test should still fail, but we shouldn't get any errors. Okay, it seems to be going great so far. So now we are fetching the correct vote count, but we are not showing it in the final result. So let's update that one. Alright, so in my service layer, I added the votes counter, and I'm getting the vote count parameter from the database. Let's see how the test now looks like. Now it's showing the correct votes count. I mean, of course it's going to be still 0 because we haven't added any test data in the database. So to make the test pass, we need to add a new fixture for the votes. Yes, look at that, it finally works. After I think almost 2 hours, I finally got the first test to work. At this point, you might be thinking, what's the point of doing test-driven development? It's so slow. I mean, that's true. It's slow when you're developing, but in the end, you will save time because you will get a lot less bugs. And that's what I'm working on. I only want to ship quality code that I know is working. And I'm trying to get very close to 100% test code coverage. Alright, so let's go back to our test and fix all of the other tests too. Wow, look at that. All of the tests are passing. Yeah, that was a lot faster. To make the first one fixed took like 2 hours, but the rest took maybe 5 minutes or so. Wow, that's impressive. I impressed myself. Alright, let's see how we can add the number of votes to show up on the user interface. So this is the component that shows up this right here. And I feel like if let me think, I can just add it right here just to test it out. So it's thread and votes count. There we go. And if I save it, we see the 0 right here. Wow, that's how, wow. This is why I enjoy using Next.js. In your front-end components, you can just read straight from the database. You don't have to worry about any REST APIs. Let's make it look a little bit more beautiful. Okay, now we have this number here of the votes count. Maybe I will add like a thumbs up button for it, like she did thumbs up this video. Okay, now I have the thumbs up there, but it's looking quite bad. So I'm gonna start working the design a little bit later on. But next, I wanna add the functionality that you can actually thumbs up different threads, and it should change this number. Yesterday I was quite busy, so I could only code for a few hours. I still made pretty good progress, so I can now show you how far I have come to finishing the voting system. So this is the same view where you can see all of the threads. And I fixed the design a little bit. And I can now show you when I click on the post, it adds the upvote there. If I want to delete all the votes, I can just run this query in the database, like this. And after I refresh the page, we should see that all of the votes are back to 0. Now the problem is the user doesn't know if he has upvoted a post already. And what happens if I try to upvote a post twice? So let's try this one. When I click on it, I get this error message here. User has already voted thread. We need some way to stop duplicate votes. And what I want to do is I want to show some kind of symbol that the user has already voted on post, probably by changing the upvote button color to orange. So let's look at the database diagram for a second. We can see on the vote table, we have the user ID. So whenever we fetch the votes, we have to get the current user ID from the session and then compare it to all of the votes and see if the user has already voted. To start making this new feature, I'm again starting by writing an integration test. As today is the Finnish Independence Day, I decided to take a little break from programming and make some Christmas pastries. Whoa, I worked for like 4 hours on this one problem and I finally got it working. I can't believe I got stuck for so long, but damn, I feel good right now. So what I tried to do is check if a current user has upvoted a thread. In the end, I ended up with this huge query. So the next job is to make this work on the frontend too. So after 4 days, I think I finally finished the feature. At least I hope so. So I pushed the commit to GitHub and it deployed successfully. So let's try it out. This is it, the first ever upvote on Hightail Vault. Yo, check it out, it's working. What about downvotes? Nice. That's what I like to see. 4 days of work and over 1000 lines of code. But damn, it feels good when you finish a feature like this. I hope you guys enjoyed this very new type of video I'm trying to make. If you liked it, hit the like button and of course remember to subscribe. And of course you can go to hightailvault.com to try out the new feature. And if you find out any bugs there, you can just DM me on Twitter at @TheAustinShelby. Thank you so much for watching the whole video and I'll see you next time.